Welcome to another Hockey Writers Podcast 2022-23 NHL preview show. Today, Matthew and I are joined by our good friend and Colorado Avalanche writer, Kerry Collins. Kerry, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. How are you guys?
Doing great. Always happy to talk some hockey, especially the past Stanley Cup champions. So let's jump right into it. They didn't have a whole lot of changes this offseason, especially at the forward group. One departure we'll talk about and one entry that we're going to talk about right now, and that is Evan Rodrigues. So, Kerry, what are your expectations? Rodrigues had a pretty big year with the Penguins last year, and now he's playing with a little more firepower, some might say. So, what are your expectations for Evan Rodrigues heading into this season?
Yeah, this guy definitely bottled lightning last year. I mean, 28 years old, he comes in. I don't think he'd ever scored 10 goals in a year, and he scores 19. Had another 24 assists, also a career high. I mean, this is a tough lineup to crack. I think that they, like this guy to kind of lay in the weeds. He can fit in anywhere. I don't know if he's making that top line, but at a team that has kind of a question mark at that second line center, I know they're probably looking at a couple of different guys for that, but I mean, he might be a bottom six player in this group, but if he keeps going like last year, he's got the versatility to get more minutes, and he can definitely load up and shoot for sure. And he'll get those scoring chances off the rush. And Colorado really likes to do that. They love to do that, especially in the bottom six. They've got a lot of speed throughout the entire lineup. And a guy like this that, is going to get those chances off the rush. He's the kind of guy that, whether it's the second line, third line, fourth line, wherever he ends up landing, he's the kind of guy that, he'll keep teams honest when those, big guns are, not out there on the ice. I think it's a really good spot for him to land in particular, particularly after that year last year. He played in every single game. And if he can tap into that, I think this is a pretty solid signing for them that should help replace some of the scoring from the loss that you talked about with Nazem Kadri going off to Calgary. So I think this is a good spot for him. I think he's a guy that they know they don't have to rely on. And I think he knows that too. And I think that's good for both of them.
Well, I mean, Rodrigues took a while for him to sign. I didn't think it would take that long. I mean, for what season he had, maybe he wanted too much money for a lot of the time. He didn't sign for a lot. Probably because he took too long to sign. A lot of teams don't have the cap space to give him a lot of money. So, but I think it's a good pickup. Like you said, he can fit in anywhere. He can play with top players like he did in Pittsburgh. He can also play in a bottom six role, but he slowed down when he went back there. So if he can play with some skill, he may be a really underrated free agent signing once we look back at this free agent class. And there's always those guys. So. And the Avalanche have had a few of them lately that have been able to work out in that role. And Nichushkin's a big one we'll talk about as being that. So we've already mentioned Kadri, and this is the biggest storyline with this team. And another guy that took forever to sign somewhere, and there was a possibility he was going to come back to Colorado, but never happened. So he's in Calgary now. Now they have a massive hole in that second line center spot. There's a few candidates, like you mentioned you haven't mentioned anyone yet. So let's talk about that. Who's going to replace that second line center spot? And well, of course, the 87 points that Kadri brought to this lineup.
Yeah, I clearly this is the biggest thing they've got going with their lineup going into this season. I mean, the Rodrigues signing is interesting from that standpoint because, he can play some center. That I really think it might be between a guy like JT Compher and Alex Newhook even. Alex Newhook is a guy that they've been, last year was his first full season. They've been waiting for him to get going. Going to be a restricted free agent after this year. I think they're going to give him every, chance to fail at this. I mean, you look at Alex Newhook, JT Compher, that might not instill a lot of confidence. But you're looking at, these are our choices here. And I think that's another reason why they probably brought in a guy like Rodrigues. I mean, it's kind of a wait and see. I think, Newhook, a guy like Newhook has to come through this year. And, Comfer was very serviceable last year. He missed a month, still almost scored 20 goals. I think he finished with 19. And I mean, it's tough for replacing a guy like Kadri. You're looking at, hit the All-Star game, 87 points. I just don't think with this group that they have, behind that lightning top line, that's just ridiculous. But I don't think they have one guy that's just going to come in and go, all right, dude, we need you to score 85 this year. I just don't think it's going to happen. They're going to have to moneyball it and, kind of go, all right, we need 4 guys to step up and each, 5 guys to each step up and they each need to score 15 more points. It might come from something like that where I think Comfer he scores 20 goals if he doesn't miss a month. Now you could say that he ended up getting hurt, but this is, I think, Newhook's spot to lose. With Kadri gone, he just absolutely has to do more. And I think he's going to get a shot on that second line, to be honest. I think they give him every chance. And if he can grab the reins on that spot, boy, is that good news for Colorado. I don't think he's scoring 87, but he could score 50. And if he does something like that, that's really good for them.
Absolutely. And I like this role for Newhook to kind of get thrown into, a little baptism by fire. I think this is going to be huge for him. I also like the mention of Comfer because I think you're absolutely right. Had he not got injured last year, he probably would have produced a lot more. And he has a chance to grow a little and produce more as well. So,
yeah. And when you look at that, with Newhook, he just sort of was all over the place. They played him with so many different people. He and Comfer played a lot together, but it was kind of like, if he can get on a line, with a Lehkonen and a Nichushkin, or even if they flip like they did a lot of the playoffs and have Nichushkin with Mikko Rantanen and Nathan McKinnon, you got Landeskog on that second line. He can clean up a lot of messes and forgive a lot of sins down there. And if you can get a young guy like that just to get going with a guy like Landeskog and another guy with like Lehkonen that showed a knack too in the playoffs, if those guys can get him going, I just think he just needs to kind of get up the ramp and then he'll jump off of it. It's just it's taking him a little while to get up the ramp right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let's move over to one of the guys you just mentioned, and that's Valeri Nichushkin. He had a great playoffs last season and then followed that up by signing a very nice contract in the offseason. So with that signing, with that kind of playoff, taste left in his mouth, where are your expectations for Valeri Nichushkin in the 2022-23 season?
Yeah, I think he's always been a pretty solid player. It's just that the scoring, wasn't there. He's always been, an absolute monster, a beast on the forecheck. He's sneaky enough, he's got sneaky enough speed to kind of play anywhere in the top 6, especially on this club, which is kind of hard with the speed all around the lineup. And he showed this in the playoffs. He's got that knack back where he can score those like greasy goals and he can score them in a timely fashion. That scoring that you were missing out on that made Dallas essentially give up on him. And he ended up going back to the KHL for a couple of years. That was back last year. And it's not like he was super duper streaky. It was there most of the year. And then same thing, like you said, in the playoffs, he was one of their most important players. And he's definitely in the mix, I think, to score 20 goals again. If he can get up and play a lot of minutes on that top line like he did, he played some substantial minutes with Rantanen and McKinnon in the playoffs. And if he can get around there and get some time on the power play, he got way more time on the power play last year. And I just think that, it's a really friendly contract if you're Valeri Nichushkin. And I just don't think they're going to regret it just because of how important he's been from a two-way standpoint and, on the forechecking side too. He's just been such an important piece on this team the last couple of years with this on the second line, clearing up some space, giving those other guys some room. So I just think that was a decent signing for him. And I think he earned it. He needed to do that last year and he absolutely did. He absolutely came through when he had to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of teams wanted him to go to free agents because I'm sure there's a lot of teams that would have lined up.
He's just a tough player. I mean, he's a really good forechecker. You know that's going to be there every night. That never takes a night off with him, ever. But he's hard to get off the puck, and he can move. Yeah. He scored a couple of game winners in overtime last year where it looked like, okay, he's just going to go in there. Oh, crap, he's past him and he scores. And you're like, oh, wow, that I didn't know he had that in him. And then when he does it 3 or 4 more times, you're like, okay, that was my fault.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
He's a good player. Sneaky type of player that is a big dude, and he can move. And that's a good combination, especially on a team like this that wants to get out and skate.
Yeah. Well, he just fits the system so well. I think that's probably why he re-signed. If it just, you don't go somewhere else. And this is where I keep going back to the Canucks when Anson Carter, that great season, and then he goes and says, well, I'm good now, and goes somewhere else and isn't good. So you just stay where you're good and you'll be fine. So I'm expecting a lot from him this season. I think he's gonna be really good. Okay, let's talk about another guy. You mentioned him as well, Arturri Lehkonen, coming in from the Montreal Canadiens. Another guy had a great playoffs, scored the winner to bring him to the Stanley Cup final, and did that with the Canadiens as well. Very useful player. I really loved him in Montreal. I think he's a great pickup for the Avalanche, and he's already shown that. So what are your expectations for him? Does he play in the top 6 normally? Now without Kadri, I mean, I would assume he would. Does he factor in that spot?
Yeah, I mean, I really think you got to slot him in on the right side of that second line. I mean, after they got him, he was really good. This is a guy that I thought he was really good in the playoffs too. He scored a couple of really big goals. He was just a solid addition to that lineup from, almost right away when they got him. And I mean, I'd be surprised. I think they're looking to him to be a big part of Kadri's, replacing some of that production. I'd be surprised, to be honest. And I had another guy one of my buddies called me crazy. I'd be surprised if he wasn't around 20, 25 goals. Like, I don't think that's too far out of the realm for this guy. I mean, he hasn't scored 20, but he played, I think, the last 16 regular season games with Colorado. He scored 6. I mean, if he plays 80 games, that's 30, So I don't know if he gets to 30, but I think at the very least he's north of 20, especially if they figure out that centerpiece, because on the left side, he's going to have Nichushkin or Landeskog, and if they can get that center position squared away on that second line, I mean, and I don't think that everything that he did was as a result of just, being around Kadri or being on that second line. He played on the second and third line too. And he was effective either way. So I think they're thinking of him to be slotted up in that second line. And I mean, no matter who it is in the center position, if he can click, I really think that in this system, he's got some of the, the pressure off, especially if he's playing in that second or third line. Everybody's looking to those top lines and, well, frankly, a couple of defensemen to score the majority of the goals on this team. So it's like he's able to get out there and exhale a little bit and go. And when he did that, I mean, he was good in the playoffs. I mean, 6 goals in 16 games. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I don't think he's scoring 30, but I'd be surprised if he didn't get at least 20. I mean, we're always talking barring injury, but I don't think 20, 25 goals is out of this guy's reach.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I mean, he's proven time and time again that he finds a way. He finds that puck around the net and can put it in big situations. The 2 overtime games that led the Canadiens and the Avalanche to the Stanley Cup final. And you're absolutely right. In 16 games, putting in 6 goals, like, he's going to produce on this team. It's just finding him that support at the center role, like you said.
All right, let's talk about, and this, we've gone through a bunch of Central Division teams, and they're placing the Avs at the top in forwards in pretty much everything. But do you think they matching up with the other teams in the Central Division, are they the top forward group?
Yeah, I mean, they're very top heavy. I mean, I'd stack them up against anybody, and pretty much anybody, but they're really top heavy. You got Mikko Rantanen, Nathan MacKinnon, Gabriel Landeskog, and any team would take those 3. But I don't think they're St. Louis, who had 20 goal scorers last year. I don't know if they're that deep, but they're deeper than people think. I mean, I don't think Nichushkin's a slouch. JT Compher almost scored 20 goals last year. Lehkonen, I think is right on the edge. We talked about that too. I think they're probably number one, but I don't think St. Louis is as far behind as people think. From a sheer depth standpoint, they can just throw people at you. And they were, to be honest, you look at the Stanley Cup finals and stuff, but I think the team that was the best against them in the playoffs was probably St. Louis, Jordan Binnington gets hurt, they're not that, the series is tied. They're up 1-0 in game 3 and Binnington gets hurt and they ended up winning one more. But I think that was the team that was the best against them. That's probably the team from a forward standpoint in particular, that's the closest to them. It's a bright light that is cast by that top line, when you're comparing forwards on these teams. And I mean, this is a team that lost a dude that scored 87 points, and they're still a pretty electric group. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to, bet against them. It's hard to bet the under when they're playing too, but but I just think that, if they can get if Sakic can, pull another rabbit out of the hat and get like that second line center figured out, I mean, look out, because those top 3 guys are going to score a bunch of points.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, well, let's head over to the defense, where they brought in one defenseman this offseason, and that was Brad Hunt. So talk to your expectations about Brad Hunt. Who is he, and what do you see getting out of him in production value for the Avs this season?
Yeah, this is a guy who's been around for a while. He's played for, a handful of teams. He's got to be, I think 34, 33. I don't know. Yeah. How old is he? He's older than he's older than the rest of the defensemen probably. But I think this guy is in he's got a great gig here. Yeah. He doesn't have a lot of pressure on him. It's kind of like Jack Johnson last year, don't screw up. Okay. And you'll get ice time because we don't want to put Curtis McDermott in. Okay. Just don't mess up. So it's I really think that their defensive pairings are probably set with, you got Cale Makar, Devin Taves, and you got Sam Girard, Josh Manson, and then Bo Byram and Eric Johnson. I think those guys are pretty set, but that hasn't exactly been the healthiest group in the world over the last 2-3 years. And, you're going to get dings and dents and bruises, and in Girard's case, a broken sternum here and there. Yeah. But it's when that stuff happens, you want to have those reliable dudes. And, Jack Johnson just sort of showed up on a tryout contract, scored the first goal of the season somehow, and then stuck around and he was pretty good for them with what they asked him to do. They weren't asking him to do too much. I really just think that's where Brad Hunt is too. Yeah. Hey,
absolutely.
Yeah. He's a locker room guy. He's been around, he's seen a bunch of stuff, and if you put him in, he's probably not gonna cost you a ton of games or anything. He's reliable, and that's really just what they need to fill in when these guys need a night off, get a little dinged up, things like that. I really just think that's where he's at, because from a depth standpoint, this defensive core is pretty good.
Yeah. Well, he was with the Canucks last season, and I liked Brad Hunt. I thought he played really good for what role he was. I thought he had a bigger role than I anticipated when he came into the season. When they signed him, I thought he was bound for the AHL. Honestly, I thought he was going to be the top call-up, but he ended up being a in and out type defenseman, just coming in, played some good minutes, played on the second unit power play. I think he did some penalty killing too. So, very serviceable defenseman. I was hoping the Canucks would actually re-sign him as depth, but
you look at
great position to be in the Avs doing that same thing.
Yeah. And when they signed him, I looked this up. I knew from following the Canucks and stuff that he had played there last year. I was surprised. He played 15 minutes a game just about. Yeah. And I was for a 33-year-old guy, that's just supposed to be a, plug and play depth dude. That's not a bad campaign,
Yeah. Could play both sides too. That's another big thing for him. And I don't know. I think it's an under the radar type signing. I think could end up paying off if injuries happen, because he can come in and play. Probably not good to be slotted in the top 4, but he can give you some minutes. Like I say, 15 minutes is not bad to be playing. So we'll see what happens. All right, let's talk about the big man, Cale Makar. This guy did everything last season. I mean, pick a trophy he didn't win. I mean, the only one he didn't win was he couldn't win because he wasn't a rookie, but he had already won that. So Stanley Cup, Norris Trophy, Conn Smythe, massive understatement that it was a great season. But what does he do for an encore? I mean, can he do anything else? I mean,
yeah, what's he gonna do? Score 100
probably
points?
just gonna do the same.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, anything close to the same, and he's gonna be a finalist, for the Norris again. But it's
win the Hart Trophy, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I said. I mean, he's got to creep into the hunt for the Hart Trophy, doesn't he? Like,
yeah.
I mean, if he does better than last year, I mean, he might get into the conversation. It's hard for defensemen to win, especially now. But it's like, that was a dream season last year for any player. I don't care, what position you're at, let alone a defenseman. I mean, and he's 23. Like,
yeah, it's like,
holy cow.
I think he turns 24 next month, but it's like, he's already one of the best defensemen in the league, and he's probably going to be for the next decade. I mean, the best thing about watching him, kind of night in and night out is I don't think any of this stuff, like good or bad, goes to his head. I don't think he gets bothered by anything negative once, he laces those skates up. I mean, we speak in hyperbole about him all the time. And I mean, he's as special a player though as I've ever seen. I'd say the sky's the limit, but he's already like up there. And I mean, you look at these other seasons that guys like Victor Hedman in Tampa Bay and Roman Josi had in Nashville. And it's like any other year they win the Norris on a runaway, and like all three of these defensemen were ridiculous. And I just think that, I mean, I just think that, he's shown to be himself over especially the last season and the last year's playoffs. He got everybody's attention. And I just think that, he's one of the best players arguably in the NHL. And it's just, he's going to be in the conversation for the Norris every year. It's just, I don't know, can a defenseman move up and get the Hart Trophy? If there's one that can, he might be a guy that could do it, especially if he keeps getting better. It's just, he's so good, and he doesn't stop. He knows when. He used to dive ahead. Now he doesn't do that anymore. And now he picks his spots better than anybody. So I mean, it's just if he can do all that again, I think Colorado will take it.
he certainly is one of the most dynamic players in the NHL right now, at any position, because he can drive the play, he can, dish the puck, he can shoot the puck. He's just absolutely skilled and so much fun to watch. All right, what about Josh Manson? He was kind of a big pickup last year for the Avs and a support role on that blue line, and now going into his first full season in Colorado. What are your expectations? Do you think he's going to be able to play that same type of role? Is he going to regress a little bit, or do you see him getting even better this year?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I see him kind of in that same role. I mean, I just think this was a great signing. We talked about it. That it was a good signing when they got him at the trade deadline last year. He was great in the playoffs. He gave him a lot of solid depth at a position that they didn't really, know about, especially after Girard got hurt early in the playoffs. And, this is an area where they've really faced some long-term injuries the last couple of seasons. I mean, Eric Johnson, has had some nasty injuries over the last couple of years. We talked about Girard stuff, things like that. They were kind of filling in, like I said, with guys like Jacob McDonald, Curtis McDermott. You had Jack Johnson last year, and those guys were okay, but Manson really came in and just kind of said, all right, thanks guys. Like, this is mine now. And he just solidified himself as that second pairing defenseman, and that's where he's going to be. I mean, going into the season, you got to have Makar and Taves at the top, but I think it's Manson and Girard again, if Girard's fully healthy, and it sounds like he is. So I just think that he's just that solid dude. You just send him out there. You know what you're going to get from him. He can hit, he can skate. He's a big dude. And I mean, you know where you know where he's at on the ice. And that's really all you can ask for when you've got that second pairing defenseman out there, you know. Do your job and, you know, make everybody keep their head on a swivel and be cognizant of where you're at. And I mean, they really needed that thing. This was a team that for 2 years was, they're soft. They don't have anybody that can hit. Now they got a couple of guys that can hit, and it made a huge difference, you know, this past summer. So I just think that this is a good signing for him and just adds a little more depth in a spot that, you know, people were kind of questioning too.
Well, he scored some goals too, which is not expected. He actually scored a few in the playoffs that he's not usually expected as a guy that can score. But I don't know if you could expect that in the regular season or not, but we'll see.
Well, one thing that defensemen find is they get a little more room back there on this team, you know, and I mean, when they were in the playoffs, he was, you know, bigger offensively. I think he scored more goals in the 20 playoff games than he did like for them during the season. But
yeah.
But I mean, you'll take that anytime you could get it in the playoffs from a guy like that. I mean, I don't think they're sending him out there going, come on, we need more points out of you.
Yeah.
But it's certainly just for his role. Yeah. Anything that he adds from that standpoint is going to be big, but for his role, he's really good at what he does, especially in, like we talked about, you know, he fits in with this team. They don't ask him to do too much that he's, you know, that's kind of out of his realm.
Yeah, a great pickup. Again, all the pickups Sakic did last year just seemed to hit. So why not re-sign him? All right, let's talk about a young guy now. And you mentioned him already too, and Bowen Byram. And you know, great that he's playing hockey for one. That's the first thing, because having that problems with the concussions, hopefully that's the thing of the past now, because being so young and having to deal with so many concussions already in your career is not good. So looked like he's okay. Had a really good playoffs, stepped in with the injuries, played some substantial minutes, played really well. What do you expect from him this season? Probably getting, you know, hopefully he's going to play a full season.
Yeah, I mean, the playoffs, he was great. And he really is the guy that stepped up when Gerard went out. I mean, he was awesome in the playoffs, but he's just got to stay away from those concussions. That's just been the knock on him. And I mean, when he is on the ice and he's playing fearless, the part of that, I don't think those are mutually exclusive. That's part of probably where some of the concussions comes from. But he just lets it go, and he's just out there playing, and he's gotten better. And I think playing alongside Eric Johnson has been really, really good for him. And he's not getting caught as much, you know. And I think this is a guy that if he can stay healthy, if he can stay away from the, you know, particularly the head injuries, I mean, he could have a breakout season. I mean, I think he could blow it up. And everything that you've seen from, he has these flashes when he was, you know, a rookie and he first got called up and it was like, holy cow, this guy's going to be crazy good.
Yeah. And
then he just got completely slowed down. But when you watched him in the playoffs, he was still playing with that abandon. It was more, you know, he didn't have it cranked up to 11. He dialed it, you know, back a little bit. So, I mean, there's no question about the ability. He's improved. I think going into this season, he's got to be flying high from a confidence standpoint after that postseason. So I just think that, you know, if he can stay away from the concussions, as crazy as this sounds, I mean, this is just another dangerous weapon for Colorado to have back there. And, you know, you've already got a couple of other guys that could score. If he can stay healthy, I mean, even if he throws out, say, 70 games, I mean, he could put up some pretty good numbers. I think this is a great find for them. It was a great draft pick, and he's just got to, you know, get around that corner of the injuries because, I mean, he can be another electric player.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I like Bowen Byram. I think he's going to be a fantastic young player if he can continue to stay healthy. Mm-hmm. All right, you mentioned this forward group as a whole being probably the best in the Central, little top heavy. with the St. Louis Blues close on their heels. Where do you rank this defensive core in the division?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you look at, I think this is an underrated defensive core. I think they're really good, especially if you remove the injury piece. We just talked about Byram. I mentioned Erik Johnson too. He's kind of the elder statesman of this group. Yeah. Samuel Girard's coming off that injury in the playoffs, but I just think they're underrated. I think this is potentially one of the better cores, defensive core in the NHL. With Manson in there now. Girard, not last season before the injuries kind of dinged him, he was awesome. Devin Taves might be one of the more underrated defensemen in the NHL.
I agree. I mean, absolutely.
He's just, if he isn't lined up next to Cale Makar, he probably gets more Norris votes, but it's just the same thing we talk about with McKinnon. I mean, it's a big beacon that Cale Makar gives off, that all eyes are on him, that you forget about guys like Josh Manson and Girard. I mean, you're looking at the third defensive pairing, having a guy like Erik Johnson out there and potentially Bowen Byram.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. That's not a top heavy group at all. The top might be the crown jewel in Cale Makar, but you still got a lot left behind him. I mean, Devin Taves gets forgotten about all the time. I don't know how many times he is just not even on the power play. I mean, it's just left alone at the point, take your shot, we don't care, and he scores. Landeskog knocks it in. It happens all the time. And I mean, I just think Taves is very underrated. I think Byram's going to be great. I just think that this group, with Manson, if Girard can stay healthy too, because he's a real calming influence in that second pairing out there. And I just think if all of them can stay healthy, I mean, this is going to be a pretty tough group to crack, because they aren't scared to jump up into the play either. And, they know what they're supposed to do. And I think that's a lot on Jared Bednar. He knows where to put these guys to get them to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Looking at a Canucks standpoint, I'd love a Bowen Byram on the third pairing here in Vancouver. So they're definitely a great. There's a reason they won the cup, right? So, all right, let's talk about the goaltending now, which has a new starter. We already mentioned kind of Darcy Kemper went to Washington. He is now in the East. So they had to get a goaltender. So they traded for a guy from the Eastern Conference as well. Alex Georgiev comes in from the New York Rangers, supposedly the starter. So do you think that he will be the starter? And if not, will he tandem with Francouz as like a 1A, 1B?
Yeah. I think he's the number one guy. I think that's why they brought him in. This has been kind of the MO for Joe Sakic the last few years. He had Philip Grubauer and he was a Vezina finalist and said, all right, so long. And then and he brings in Darcy Kemper, who, had played for some decent Minnesota teams and kind of carried some Arizona teams when they did make the playoffs. But it's kind of like, I think he's the number one, then he's gone. And then I think, Georgiev's the number one. I don't think he's going to be relied on to start as many games as Grubauer and Kemper were the last 2 years. Let me put it that way. I mean, when Grubauer was out that year, it was kind of like, well, we'll sit you when we're playing Arizona and pray, and it was kind of like, he just had to play every night. And because Francouz is out, he had double hip surgery, all that stuff. For the first time in a long time, they've really got some depth in this spot. And people forget that, Francouz was 6-0 in the playoffs last year, and they only played 20 games. They went 10-4 in the other one. So it was like, people forget about that. When Kemper was hurt, he came in and he was pretty good. Yeah. He was in there for one of those crazy Edmonton games, but that were like scoreboard operators, the most tired guy in the whole arena after the game. But he, like I said, he was 6-0. He was good in the postseason in 2020 until he got hurt. And then, that was when Grubauer got hurt. Then he got hurt, and you're dealing with Michael Hutchinson, and it was like, oh crap, here we go. He's another guy that if he can stay healthy, but as a backup, this is a pretty good, pretty solid tandem. And frankly, just don't give up 4, and you got a good shot, with this team, to win. And I just think that, Georgiev probably hasn't had the experience as some of these, hasn't played in, 70 games or anything in a season, but I don't think he has to do that with the backup they have. So I think he's the number 1, but I don't think they lose that much when the backup comes in and Francouz either.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think you're right. They're probably going to run him more as a tandem to begin the season and then kind of ride the hot hand from there, but we'll see. So the offense is top of the Central. The defense is top of the Central. Where does the goaltending fall?
Yeah, this is a tougher racket. This is a really good division, I think, for goaltenders. I mean, I think they're probably in the middle of the road. I don't think either of these guys are good as, say, you say Saros. Jake Ettinger for Dallas is probably still making saves in Calgary somewhere right now. Are they as good as Marc-Andre Fleury? I don't know. Depends what side of the bed Jordan Binnington wakes up on. Not to mention Connor Hellebuck. That's another really good goalie. I put this group in the middle of the road. You don't really know. Neither of these guys have really been full-time starters. You've got tons and tons up in front of you on the ice when you're standing back there. But I mean, this is a good division from a goaltender standpoint. I mean, we just rattled off a ton of names, and they're all like pretty good. Some of those guys, there's multiple cups in that group. Jake Ettinger was one of the stories of the playoffs last year. And I mean, he was ridiculous. So, and you know what Saros did? And Saros was actually really good against Colorado during the regular season. And then
injuries,
couldn't play in the playoffs. So it's like, I don't know. I just think this group with the unknowns, there's a lot of question marks. You haven't really seen either of these guys play, be the number 1 guy. So I think they're probably in the middle of the road here. It's just tough because you don't know. Fleury just seems to be pretty good no matter how old he is or where he goes. And then it just depends on, it depends on a lot of things too. Like, when you look at these other teams, a lot of them are probably leaning more on their goaltenders than Colorado is. I mean, middle of the road group, but that ain't bad with everybody else that's in front of them, I'd say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, they don't have to be massively great. They don't have to carry the team, which, I mean, they got probably the best gig you can have as a goaltender in the NHL. So
no kidding.
All right, Harry, we're going to go into our quick fire round here. We've done this, all of our previews, and we're just going to fire some questions at you. And, 1-word answers are fine. They can be a 1 sentence or 2 to kind of explain, but you can just fire off a player or whatever for these answers. They don't have to be long answers. So I'll start off with this first one. What is the biggest storyline or question mark going into this season for the Avs?
Well, we talked about, I think the biggest storyline is McKinnon's contract, but I think the biggest question mark is that goaltending. I think everywhere else they're solid. That's got to be the biggest question mark.
Who are going to be 1 or 2 breakout stars?
I think Bowen Byram for sure is one of them, but I mentioned this before. I think Artturi Lehkonen. I think he's in for a pretty good year.
Yeah, I agree on both those for sure. All right, 1 player that needs to bounce back from last season. This is gonna be a tough one because there's not many.
I think it's got to be Samuel Girard. He drew the ire of a lot of people. It's not like he was playing perfectly healthy, but I mean, there's a big microscope on some of those, defensemen, and I think that's a guy that needs to bounce back because I know that he wasn't very happy with his season last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Which Avalanche player could be an X factor this season?
Oh, it's got to be Georgiev. I mean, the X factor has been the goalie the last couple of years. I mean, Grubauer was great. You know what you're getting from just about everywhere else. You can't really call Valeri Nichushkin an X factor anymore because everybody knows about him. So I just think it's got to be that goalie. I mean, he's really he's one of the main guys they brought in. So he's going to have to be good.
Yeah, for sure. All right, this is gonna be a tough one because there's not many of these guys knocking on the door in Avalanche, but one rookie or prospect that could surprise and make the roster out of training camp.
Oh, I gotta say Ben Myers. They played at University of Minnesota. They brought him in at the end of last year. They signed him too late, so he didn't make the playoff roster, but I think he played in a few games at the end of the year. He got some minutes. I think he averaged around 10 minutes a game, scored a goal. That's a guy that I think he probably starts, with the big club. I don't think he starts in the AHL, and I think he's a good, versatile player that's going to get some minutes for him.
Yeah. I like it. All right. Who is another player that fans should be watching that we have yet to mention or have briefly mentioned already?
Oh man, we talked about everybody.
As I was gonna say, we've talked about pretty much everybody.
I mean, we talked about how big Alex Newhook has to be.
Yeah.
I think this Ben Myers kid could be one of them.
Yeah.
That kind of a guy to step up. He's probably not going to get that overload of minutes or anything. Logan O'Connor's another guy that every year he's taken a little bit of a step, and I don't know. I like those guys that have a lot of speed. When they get slotted in, if somebody gets hurt, all of a sudden you're like, who in the heck is this guy? And here they come. So, I mean, it's tough, others to look out for when they all got a target on their back now. So it's, and they're pretty set. So it's just, it's a tough one. That's probably the toughest question, but I'd just say, I don't know. I'd say Newhook is the guy that, I think he's in for a good year. And he absolutely has to have it. So hopefully he could step up and, fill that role.
Fair. All right. We'll be watching. All right. These ones may be easy, at least for one of them. Forwards, who will lead the team in scoring for forwards?
I'm going to say Mikko Rantanen. He's done it the last 2 years and people don't remember that. So
there you go.
I mean, he's been like the solid, Landeskog has gotten a little bit of injuries, or he gets his suspensions here and there. McKinnon's missed some time too, but Rantanen's a guy that's always there. He's almost always there every night. So I'll stick with him on offense, even though it's probably going to be McKinnon, but I'll stick with Rantanen. McKinnon in a contract year might be the scariest thing I've ever said. So
that's also true.
And we probably don't have to say this, but who's going to lead the team on defense in scoring?
If it's not Cale Makar, it means something seriously went wrong. There was a nasty injury, whatever. If it's not him, I would be absolutely shocked. Even if he gets hurt, he still led the defenseman in scoring that 1 year when he did. So it's got to be him. I got to go with him.
That's pretty obvious choice.
That's
there.
Pretty good.
All right. I'm gonna change this one a little bit. Pick one player that you think could be traded before the deadline, or one player that the Colorado Avalanche could trade for to cap off their second cup run. Because I doubt they'll be trading anyone. I doubt they'll be looking at
the one guy that I could see him trading because of his contract if he doesn't perform would be Samuel Girard. I mean, he's still got quite a few years left. I think he's making $5 million a year for the next 5 or 6. They talked about it last year, but I don't know how serious that was. That's the one I could see them,
moving out,
trading for. Jeez,
I didn't even give you a chance to prepare for this.
Claude Giroux. No, I'm just kidding. That's a joke.
That's a good one. I was waiting for saying JT Miller or something.
Yes.
That would have been more if you didn't resign.
Yeah.
All right. This is a fun one. One bold prediction or a hot take for the season. This one could be tough for the Avs because
bold predict. I'll say I mentioned this before. My bold prediction is that Cale Makar wins the Hart Trophy. I think there's I think he could be in line to do it. I think he gets close to or scores 100 points. I think there's Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid fatigue. Those guys you got to score 70 goals if you're Connor McDavid to get, or Austin Matthews to get it. You got to score 135 or 40 points for people not to go, we've seen this before, and I mean, that's a real thing. I'm a big NBA guy. Russell Westbrook averages a triple double a year and finishes 6th in the MVP voting. I think that happens where unless you're doing the crazy stuff every year, I think there might be a little fatigue on those guys. That's just me talking, but I could see him doing it. I could see him winning it if he gets over 100 points and those other guys just kind of do. You say if Austin Matthews only scores 55, that sounds crazy, but Connor McDavid only scores 120.
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely, I love it. I would love to see that happen. Defenseman kind of in the voting for the Hart. So
I think he's got a shot. I mean, he's good. He's on one of the best teams, and I mean, he just doesn't take a night off. So I just really think that he could get up there if those other things sort of, fall his way.
Yeah,
absolutely. All right, last question for you here, Kerry. Where will the Avalanche finish in the standings, and do they repeat as Stanley Cup champions?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot riding on the goaltending, of course, but we said that last year and the year before. So, and the year before, 2 years ago, they won the President's Trophy. Last year, they won the Cup. I mean, I still think they're in the conversation for a President's Trophy this year. Repeating as Stanley Cup champions, it is so hard to do.
Only 2 teams have done it in the in the salary cap era. So
so it's that's such a hard thing to do. Now we're coming off of a team that just did it, but this team could. When we're sitting here talking about McKinnon's contract, this is the last year that really allows them, to have all those other dudes, and they've got essentially all of the pieces in place. Now you don't know about the goaltender, but I mean, I do think that they, are probably the best team in the Central. They're going to be in the conversation for the, the President's Trophy. And I just think, do they have a shot at repeating? Absolutely. Cause I think they're loaded. And the problem is that the NHL playoffs is one of the reasons we love watching this sport is you just flat out never know.
Yeah.
And I just think repeating is so hard. And I don't know if they repeat, but I mean, I certainly would be surprised if they, didn't make it at least to a conference final or something like that. I mean, I already did my crazy prediction with Cale Makar. So I don't know if I could say flat out, they're going to repeat. I don't know if I could say that, but I think they're going to be definitely in the conversation. And if they're not one of the last 4 teams standing, I'd be shocked.
Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, we're going to move on to our final segment here. That's our article of the day. And normally Matt and I also join in and pick articles of the day, but today we are going Colorado specific. So Kerry, you're going to pick us a article of the day from the Colorado Avalanche writing team. It can be your own. We've had many other writers pick their own pieces on here, so don't feel bad if you do. But give us
I won't feel bad.
Give us an article from the Colorado Avalanche writing team.
Yeah, my article of the day is from my favorite Avalanche writer, which is me. Actually, that's not true. My favorite is Marco. But anyways, the story I chose was 3 Avalanche players needing big season and contract years. I thought it would fit in with the preview theme we've got going on here. And the 3 players I picked were Alex Newhook, Bowen Byram, JT Compher. The first 2, we've talked about at length. Newhook absolutely has to, come through this year. They've been kind of waiting for him. Byram, I think, really, really does have a big year this year without, if he can stay away from the concussion issues. I mean, those are no joke, of course. Yeah. But, I mean, when you look at his numbers last year, only Taves and Makar were ahead of him in his per 60 rate. So when he played, he was good. It's just you got to stay out there. And if he can do that, look out. And then Compher, of course, he's 27. He might be going into potentially his last contract or second to last contract. And I mean, he was a guy that came here a million years ago when they traded Ryan O'Reilly to the Sabres. It's, and last year he was really good. I mean, I think he scores, 20, 22, 23 goals last year. He doesn't miss a month, and he got off to such a great start, and he missed all of November. And I really think that slowed him down all the way into just about February. So that's a guy, those two of the names on that list are two guys that we talked about potentially filling that second center spot that is left vacant by Kadri. And either way, both of these guys are going to be, given every chance to fail. And Compher was good in the playoffs. Compher, it was kind of used as a Swiss Army knife last year. I mean, I think he played on like 12 different line combinations where he played, in multiple games with all those. He was all over the place, but he didn't really slow down. That inconsistency didn't really hurt him. So if he can get a little consistency, I think Compher, but these are three guys that have to come through for him. And it's not just for Colorado, it's for that next contract too. And we saw what happened. Saw what happened with Nichushkin and Kadri on this exact team in these exact situations last year. So it's a big chance for them. And I mean, I don't know. Sakic hasn't proved himself wrong yet. So we'll see what happens if he sticks with these guys. But I think I just thought that those are the three guys going forward, and as we're talking about going into the season, those are three guys that everybody, especially here in Colorado, is going to have their eyes on for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Those are, like you said, three players that need really big seasons this year for the Avalanche. So, all right, you at home, please make sure you are following along with all of our Colorado Avalanche writers over at the Hockey Writers, including Kerry. Kerry, thank you again for joining us. Make sure you're following all of our writers on their social media channels as well. Make sure you're following the Hockey Writers on all of our social media channels. We are on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Click and subscribe, and also on TikTok now. And please make sure to sign up for the Morning Skate newsletter at morningskate.io. That's going to do it from us here at the Hockey Writers Podcast on another preview show. We will see you next time.